Hey everyone, it's 10 Types, and today I'm going to be telling you 4 Pokemon tricks that are super interesting building decks that many of you may not know about or may not know about super well, and I'm going to explain them to you. We are going to be looking at 4 deck lists. Really, the deck lists don't matter too much, though. All that matters is the idea behind them, and these have to do with card counts and some interesting aspects. So first of all, this is an Arceus, Duraludon, Umbreon list, and you see the lines of Pokemon here. We have a 4-2 Arceus, a 2-2 Duraludon, 2-2 Umbreon, and then 3 other tech Pokemon. So now I think in order to understand this concept, we can take a look at the list as a whole. Not too much crazy going on here, normal supporters, whatever. And then we do see 4 Iono. I don't know if it doesn't matter too much in this case, but what we want to know is kind of the game plan of this deck. So first of all, the game plan of this deck is that you go Arceus V-Star. And Arceus V powers up your other Pokemon, but Arceus V-Star also does it. So you prefer to go first and then get a turn 2 Arceus V-Star and use Trinity Nova to power up your other Pokemon, which accelerates energy to your Umbreon or Duraludon, whichever you need in the matchup. And then you could also go in with Arceus V if you go turn 1 going second. So you can use that to power up your other Pokemon. You don't do damage in the process, but it's still pretty solid. And so the idea of this list is that you play a 4-2 Arceus, which is normally very unusual. We see the other lines are 2-2s. Generally, a list will be like will have like a 2-2 evolution, a 3-3, maybe even a 4-3, because obviously you can't get to the evolution without the basic. So you want more of the basic. But in this case, we have twice as many of the basic as we have the stage 1, or in this case, V-Star, which is essentially a stage 1. And the reason for this is, 1, of course, Arceus V has a powerful attack, which is understandable, but 2, you really want to start with it. And also, you have the idea that if you go first, and your opponent is somehow able to pull off a turn 1 KO, you really need that turn 2 Arceus V-Star, so therefore you go ahead and you have a backup Arceus. So you want to back up Pokemon on the bench, you want to be able to start it and have great odds of that as well, especially with something like Lumineon V being really awful to start pretty much all the time. You want to have these Arceuses to be able to counter that. And so that's why you sometimes see really high counts of a basic that you really want to start. You see this with something like Jirachi. We've seen in the past a setup-based Pokemon, or like Mew. That's not as common, but you'd play 4 of that. You're never going to use 4 of it. Same thing with Kofi. You see 4 Kofis played in the Lost Zone. People aren't going to use 4 Kofis. 2, maybe 3, but because it's the optimal starter, you choose to play 4 copies of it. Next up, we have a different trick here. This one's a bit different, but again, this is one you're probably familiar with. We see that you have a actually, it's a 4-4-4 Gardevoir line. We see it plays 2 of the Gardevoir EX, which is setup-based Pokemon that accelerates your energies. Then we also see the list plays 2 of the Gardevoir, which is an attacker here, and it also has a soft draw engine. So those are obviously 2 different ideas, but they're the one's the attacker, the one's the engine. Essentially, it's a Gardevoir deck, which is kind of cool. We also see some support Pokemon, Manaphy, Cresselia, Zacian, Greninja, Mew, and the Mew I mentioned earlier. Only played 1 copy here, though. But we see that the very important idea that I want to stress is the idea of what basic and stage 1 to choose to evolve into. So this Kirlia is insane. It just draws cards. It's really good. That's why there's 3 of it, but there's not 4 of it because this other Kirlia helps you set up. And then we look at this Ralts. This Ralts has more HP. Generally, in terms of evolutions, you're looking to have as much HP as possible to pass certain thresholds. In this case, 60 HP going to 7 HP is much better against, say, stabilized Lost Zone-based spread deck. But yeah, 70 is not that much worse than 80, but it is somewhat worse. You're looking to have as much HP and pre-evolutions as possible. But then we see 1 copy of this Ralts, which is a possible attacker tech in certain matchups. So this is the idea that you have a mixture of pre-evolutions. This can actually get really interesting because they have positives and negatives. So sometimes we want to have a mixture of pre-evolutions, even though they usually don't matter too much, because sometimes they can really count, and they have weird things that come in useful. The 10 from Ralts can even be useful at times, or the 30 from Kirlia, so you want to keep that in mind and judge and look at all the pre-evolutions of Pokemon when you're taking that into account. Actually, I have a whole video on this before the Gardevoir EX deck came out, but I made a video about specifically which Ralts to choose, which is kind of funny, and I think a solid watch, but yeah, you just want to be able to consider the different possibilities. So you could even play this other Ralts that's out with 70 HP, very similar to this Ralts, except it doesn't have as good of an attack. This attack's defensive. This attack's also kind of defensive, but it's very interesting. And then we see, of course, a split of the Gardevoirs. In this case, you could actually play Gallade as well, but you don't want to be exceeding the amount of evolution generally than you can have basics, although this currently actually gets more options of the line into play, so you can rare candy some of the Ralts and then have other curlies on the bench, which is kind of interesting. But generally, you just want to consider, say, with Flaffy, there are various Mareefs you can use, or at least there were. I don't remember if there are anymore. But yeah, you can. I'm sure there are, and you can diversify the Mareefs depending on various use cases. Although it doesn't necessarily matter too much, these small optimizations can make a big deal. Next up, we have another really interesting one that actually breaks the rule of the first one. It's the opposite. So you want to know when to use this and use the other one. And this is a Lost Zone based deck with a stage 1, or in this case, a V-Star evolution line. And it has a 2/3 Gudra, Hisuian Gudra V, Hisuian Gudra V-Star. So this is obviously completely opposite of the 4/2 that we saw earlier. And in this case, the V is unsurprisingly not that useful. And the V-Star is useful, but still, why is there less of the V? So the idea you want to take away from this is that the V-Star is not really searchable. We see in terms of searching basic Pokemon, we have 6 options: Battle VIP Pass and Nest Ball. And Nest Ball is a bit more versatile, but that doesn't matter too much in this case. And then we also see Hisuian Heavy Ball is able to grab it out of the prizes. So let's say you prize a Hisuian Gudra V, you can get out. If you prize a V-Star, you cannot. So in some senses, we have 7 options that are specifically for basics. Ultra Ball gets either basics or evolutions. In this case, it will often be grabbing your evolution. So now you have 5 ways of being able to get an evolution. 5 cards you could draw to get an evolution. But then to get the basic, you have, I believe, 11 cards. So that's obviously way more. In this case, Ultra Ball is allowing you to access the V or the V-Star, but then Battle VIP Pass, Nest Ball, and then the Hisuian Heavy Ball allow you to access the V. So you just have so many extra options to be able to access the V. So you'll play more of the V-Star to be able to draw into it more consistently. Because, of course, you can search out a card, but you can also just draw into it normally. So you want to be able to have your greatest option. And this is kind of like the same idea where you have the 4 Comfy, most likely to start it. And now, if you played 3 of the V, you'd be more likely to start the V, which you don't really want to be starting. So you have a better odds of starting your ideal Pokemon, as well as being able to draw into your V-Star just a bit better, and you just have greater consistency all in all. Last trick I have here for you, this is a Chien-Pao Baxcalibur deck. We use Chien-Pao to do damage and Search Energy, Baxcalibur to hit, accelerate, and then hit really hard. And this is another concept that I'm sure some of you are familiar with, but we see 1/1 Arceus line. And obviously we looked at Arceus before, and it was a great attacker, had so much use. It doesn't really have that much use in this deck, except for its V-Star power. This is something I want to keep in mind. People traditionally play Palkia because it is completely used to its maximum potential, but sometimes only one use of a card is really important. Of course, Lumineon isn't really used for its attack too much in this deck, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with that, but now Arceus V-Star is used for its V-Star power, and this brings the idea that a V-Star power is really good in the current standard format. So if you don't have access to that, just throw in a 1/1 Arceus. It's not always the right place, but oftentimes it is. And this is not a single prize exclusive deck, so it's not like Arceus V and V-Star are just prizes that you're waiting to give up, but it's still really nice. So you don't need to throw in a Palkia, though. You can throw in an Arceus to get the better consistency, but obviously it's up to you. And these 4 rules aren't always true. You just want to be able to kind of understand and then mess around with different ideas. Don't restrict yourself to what you've heard other people say of just like basic ideas of, say, like a 3/2 line of every evolution or a 4/4. You can mix things up and definitely don't include cards you don't need. Cut cards from where you can and make your deck as streamlined as possible. And obviously, Arceus and consistency. But I'm interested in hearing if there are any other tips and tricks you want me to talk about. And if you have any other problems with deck building, I'd be glad to help as well. And you can check out my Discord server, link below, or not link below, but it's linked in my channel in the banner, actually. So I hope you enjoyed, though. And as always, I'm excited to see you next time.